Thank you, Monica. Thank you all so much for being here and welcome to this press conference co-hosted with the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy and the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights. My name is Sheila Herlihy Hennessee. I'm the Director of Faith Organizing here at the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, or VICPP. And our mission is to engage people of faith and people of goodwill in advocating for racial, social, and economic justice in Virginia's policies and practices. And as people of faith and people of goodwill, we are here today to speak in support of our immigrant neighbors. Through budget amendments and an executive order, the governor has tried to push communities in Virginia into an adversarial relationship with immigrants. One perspective shared by all the faith leaders speaking today is that we are called to welcome our immigrant neighbors, not criminalize them. And so we are here to share our support of our brothers and sisters and to speak against these policies that would be so harmful to communities here in Virginia. Our first speaker is Levi Goren of the Commonwealth Institute for Fiscal Analysis, or TCI. Levi, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sheila. And thank you to the Virginia Interfaith Center and the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights for organizing this press conference and inviting me to join. We share the concerns about the harmful impacts of these budget amendments on our families and communities if they take effect. The good news is that Virginia legislators have the opportunity tomorrow to reject these amendments and protect our communities. It's worth remembering that in Virginia, the budget takes precedence over existing regular laws. So beyond the critical decisions in it about how we raise and spend tax revenue, it can also override regular laws on non-money issues. We're talking today about 3 budget amendments that seek to do that in harmful ways. First, Amendment 64 would eliminate an add-on for all Virginia students attending Hispanic serving institutions and instead provide a grant for graduate nursing students at those institutions. But unfortunately, the new amendment includes exclusionary language that would prevent Dreamers and undocumented students from accessing these grants. The General Assembly made a policy choice in 2021 to extend state financial aid access to Virginia residents who graduated from our Virginia high schools, even if they are ineligible for federal financial aid due to their immigration status. This amendment would go back on that commitment to our communities and limit opportunities for Dreamers and undocumented students to access these nursing grants. Second, Amendment 154 would mandate that local officials comply with all federal immigration detainer requests, even though the federal government doesn't reimburse for the costs of doing so. Specifically, this amendment would require local jail officials to hold individuals up to 48 hours after they would have otherwise been released in order for ICE to potentially come pick those folks up. And it threatens our state funding for our local jails if they don't comply. Third, Amendment 192 would transfer the closed state prison in Culpeper to the counties of Culpeper and Page, under the unusual condition that they would not be eligible for state funding for any of its ongoing costs. This is concerning because we're worried the localities could enter into an agreement with ICE or with a private prison provider to hold individuals on immigration matters with that extra space. And we do know that local governments in this area and local elected officials have a history of entering into agreements with ICE to do that federal work, even though they're not federal officers. These amendments would all harm our communities and economy by dividing families and making Virginia a less welcoming place. And together we urge Virginia legislators to reject these amendments and instead prioritize strengthening Virginia's economy and communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Levi. Our next speaker is Reverend Cozy Bailey the chair of the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP, and an associate minister at First Mount Zion Baptist Church.
Thank you, Sheila, and good afternoon to all. I won't be talking in detail about the 3 amendments in question, as our previous speaker did a great job in outlining them. Instead, I'm going to focus on the concepts that I believe that this governor and this administration has continually shown a lack of sensitivity about. And what I mean by that is that I believe that we can all agree, for the most part, we are a nation of immigrants. And I say because, for the most part, it's because you all know that my ancestors did not immigrate here. We were forcibly brought here. But we are in fellowship and partnership with those who have immigrated to this country over the years. The governor's actions indicate that he has either an ignorance or an insensitivity to the local climate and culture of the various municipalities and communities within the Commonwealth. He seems to not understand that basic tenet that we are a diverse Commonwealth and that we are made up of different cultures and, most importantly, people who come from different countries. The actions that he has taken would compel Virginia law enforcement organizations to not follow Virginia law, but be compelled to become federal deputies. That is not something that his constituents and all residents of the Commonwealth need to have. His actions reflect, again, ignorance and insensitivity to the local climate and cultures of the people within Virginia. But I also want to highlight, not only do these budgetary actions take that into consideration, but I want to highlight Executive Order 47, where once again, this governor seems not to understand that law enforcement organizations throughout the Commonwealth cooperate with federal agencies within the law, but he wants to compel them to collaborate. That is not what the people in the local municipalities expect, desire, nor deserve. So we stand in partnership with all who are represented here for the legislature to not accept these amendments that the governor has made and to continue to make Virginia a place that is welcoming to all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Reverend Bailey. Our next speaker is Reverend Julio Hernandez, the Interim Executive Director of the Congregation Action Network. Julio?
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Actually, I'm now the Executive Director, so I'm no longer interim. My name is Julio Hernandez. I am also a pastor, a son of Salvadoran parents, a husband of an Arab family, and a father of children of mixed ethnicities. My family and I am deeply concerned about this executive order made by the governor. We're here today to hear the words of faith leaders and community leaders in support of our beloved community. This anti-immigrant rhetoric is irresponsible and based on biased prejudice. We're calling Virginians to stand up for the beautiful, diverse community we have created in this state. While it is not perfect, this direction that the state's top officials are leading us towards is destructive. We're calling our leaders to be people of compassion for all. I'm reminded of the Gerard Manley Hopkins poem, Pied Beauty, where he speaks about all things counter, original, spare, strange. Whatever is fickle, freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle dim. All these things are worthy of praise to the Creator that gives good things to all of us. So today I'd like to take a moment to pray. Would you join me in prayer? Creator, you made us all. We are human. We humbly bow to those who are created in the good image of the Creator, who created this beautiful floating blue planet. Fill us with awe and wonder again. Rather than seeing our neighbor as an enemy, May we learn to live in harmony with all peoples. As the golden rule transcends many faiths, may this be a guiding value to treat others as we want to be treated. May we embrace the common humanity of all. And we lift up those who live in fear on all sides. This fear is a force that clouds our judgment and common sense. May we honor each other in ways that make life sustainable and peaceful. We are grateful for this day of life, Creator, and may we live in the manner that you have taught us. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend, and congratulations on the new job title. Our next speaker is Dr. Charlie Turner, who is a co-founder and board member of the Virginia Muslim Civic League. I know today's the second day of Eid, so also Eid Mubarak.
Thank you, Sheila. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon all of you. The Islamic tradition is ripe with parables detailing the fates of cities and nations that were tested by God through their treatment of the traveler and the refugee. And these parables would have resonated for the Prophet Muhammad and his companions, who themselves became refugees following their displacement from the city of Mecca. The Prophet and his companions were exiled, or deported in today's vernacular, because they preached a message that ran counter to the economic interests and the societal values of their time. The foundation of that message, that all individuals are endowed with fundamental human rights to basic needs and equal treatment. And today we are presented with that same recurring trial mentioned so many times in Islamic and biblical narratives. And we have a chance to answer the question of, will we be one of those nations that treats the traveler, the refugee, the poor, the sick, and the ostracized with fairness and compassion? Or will we fail this test, continuing to abduct and deport hundreds, maybe thousands, who come from nations that some deem questionable, or those who advocate for justice for those many deem as lesser, and in doing so become yet another parable in the annals of time of a nation that neglected its responsibility to its fellow men and women, passing into disgraced obscurity. Our nation has been one of several false starts down the path of becoming a more just society, but people of faith have played an integral role in pioneering that path. And we gather here today because together, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Jews, Hindus, and so many others believe we can achieve a society that elevates everyone, regardless of race, creed, ethnicity, nation of origin, gender, or orientation. So thank you for having us. Thank you for including the Muslim community. God bless you. And may our elected officials choose fairness and compassion for our neighbors, our colleagues, friends and family, and all of those who inhabit our Commonwealth with us. Amen.
Thanks, Dr. Turner. Next up, we have Kenn Speicher, who's the co-founder of the Northern Virginia Friends of Refugees and is also in leadership for the United Methodist Conference Advocacy Network. Kenn? You are currently on mute, Kenn. I'm so sorry. Can I? Thank you.
Oh, I hate when I do that. Thank you, Sheila. If you haven't heard already, the Trump administration admitted yesterday that on March 17th, ICE agents wrongfully arrested a Maryland man here legally since 2019. Without due process, they deported him to the Terrorism Confinement Center in El Salvador. They took him from his car with his 5-year-old autistic son in the back. His wife only knew where he was when she saw him days later on TV at the prison. The administration claims he was arrested because of a clerical error, but now has no way to get him back. These are the people that Governor Youngkin has ordered state law enforcement to partner with and ask local cities and counties to do the same through 287G agreements. This is a story not just of gross incompetence, but also of injustice and moral failure by our government. For United Methodists, we are called to moral action. U.S. immigration policy calling for mass deportation of millions of people is not an act of justice, but a failure to recognize the sacred worth of every individual. United Methodist teachings uphold the belief that God's grace extends to all people, regardless of nationality, legal status, or social standing. These teachings compel us to advocate for the oppressed, speak out against injustice, and extend compassion to the marginalized. The United Methodist social principles call for humane immigration policies and the protection of immigrant families. In addition, they call for United Methodists to oppose all laws and policies that attempt to criminalize, dehumanize, or punish displaced individuals and families based on their status as migrants, immigrants, or refugees. I'll end with this. Throughout the Bible, God's people are called to love migrants. From Genesis to Revelation, we see that God desires us to help the most vulnerable in our midst, especially the sojourner. Leviticus issues a call to love the sojourners among us, treating them as if they were one of our citizens. Hebrews tells us that in opening our homes to guests, we may be entertaining angels without knowing it. And Jesus Christ himself was a refugee, fleeing persecution under the oppressive regime of Herod. To support policies that perpetuate the suffering of immigrants and refugees is to betray Christ's commandment to love our neighbors as ourselves. As a founder of Nova Friends of Refugees and an active United Methodist, I urge our Virginia leaders to reject the proposed anti-immigration budget amendments. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Next up, we have Reverend William Levwood, lead minister at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church.
Thank you, Sheila, and good afternoon, everyone. You've already heard from some of the other speakers about the foundational values that guide us in how we approach these amendments. In Unitarian Universalist tradition is rooted in the foundation of human dignity. As Unitarian Universalists, we declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. Unitarian Universalists also draw from multiple sources, both religious and non-religious, from multiple traditions. And so we see that we are not alone in this assertion that every person is inherently worthy with the right to flourish with dignity. This truth can be found in the Torah, in the New Testament, in the Quran, and sacred hadiths. The sacred commitment to love your neighbor as yourself is first articulated in the book of VACIR, known as the book of Leviticus in English. Jesus is quoting that Torah passage when he speaks as part of the emerging rabbinic tradition in the Gospel of Mark, placing this sacred commitment to love your neighbor as yourself at the center of Christianity. And I think especially of the call in the Gospel of Matthew to care for the least of these, as for Christians to care for the least of these as they would care for Jesus himself. Jesus, the incarnation of God in human form, can be seen in every human person, and especially in the least of these. This same call to feed the hungry, to help the imprisoned human being, to reach out to the sojourner, in almost identical language, is included in a sacred hadith from the Prophet Muhammad as well. And at the very beginning of the Quran in Surah Baqarah, where the righteous are defined as those who give charity to relatives, to orphans, to the poor, and to the needy traveler. So I implore legislators to keep this sacred commitment at the center of your heart and mind as you look at these amendments, that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity and compassion. And we're concerned that these amendments are not aligned with that sacred commitment, that Amendment 192 would pave the way for immigration officials to use the Culpeper and Page County Correctional Facility to imprison migrants and refugees, to hold them longer than to imprison them rather than to treat them with their inherent worth and dignity, to treat them as neighbors and to care for them as we would care for the least of these. We're concerned that Amendment 154, which we urge you to oppose, would allow immigration officials to detain migrants and refugees longer than would otherwise be legal, that a migrant or refugee would have even less rights under the law than even a violent criminal would be afforded, and that exemption would violate the sacred commitment to love your neighbor as yourself and to affirm the equal dignity of every person as a children of God. And we ask you to oppose Amendment 64 at a time when we need to be training more people for nursing, at a time when we have a drastic shortage of nurses. Is not a time to impede our society's ability to care for the least of these, for the sick in need of care, by putting up barriers for potential nurses. Even dreamers, children who are brought to this country as young children, would not be allowed to get training to become nurses at a time when we should be recruiting more nurses rather than creating barriers. So we implore you, as the universal ethics of religious traditions across the globe and across this diverse nation call us, we implore you to remember to uphold the values we hold as sacred commitments by keeping at the forefront of your heart and mind these sacred commitments to love your neighbor as yourself, to care for the least of these, so that every person's inherent right to dignity, love, and compassion can be made real in the state of Virginia.
Thank you so much, Reverend Levwood. Our next speaker is Vicki Fishman, the Director of Government and Community Relations at the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. Vicki?
Thank you, Sheila. Good afternoon. I'm Vicki Fishman with the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. As the public affairs arm of the organized Jewish community, we represent more than 100 synagogues, social service agencies, and other Jewish institutions across Virginia, Maryland, and DC. We are deeply concerned with the public rhetoric and that dehumanizes immigrants. This climate of demonization that has become normalized in public and political discourse is anathema to the teachings and traditions of our community. Well over 100 years ago, Jewish immigrants fleeing pogroms in Russia and Eastern Europe founded the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society and many other social service agencies designed to support the newest Americans and assist in their resettlement. Today, this network of agencies continues to provide services to immigrants, both Jewish and non-Jewish, coming to this country from all corners of the world. As Jews and as Americans, we know too well what the dark path of dehumanization looks like and where it leads. Our sacred texts and our own history demand that we embrace the stranger and help those in need. We therefore support ensuring that undocumented immigrants have access to social services and healthcare, and we support maximizing access to educational services and opportunities. Denying such services and opportunities is not only cruel, but also counterproductive and harms both the immigrant and society at large. We oppose efforts to divert state and local resources, law enforcement in particular, to federal immigration enforcement efforts. As a community, we rely on good relations with law enforcement, and we rely on our law enforcement agencies having the capacity and focus to keep our neighborhoods safe. Enlisting local police for immigration enforcement strains their limited resources and degrades the trust that is essential to healthy neighborhoods. For all of these reasons, we join our partners at VICPP and VACIR in calling on the General Assembly to reject the governor's proposed anti-immigrant amendments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicki. Our final, oh, that's not quite right. Our next speaker is going to be Chris Kaiser, who is the Policy Director of the ACLU of Virginia, American Civil Liberties Union. Chris?
Thanks, Sheila, and thank you everybody for joining us today. First, I want to say at the ACLU of Virginia, we're really proud to say that we've ramped up our efforts on behalf of immigrant rights over the last several years, in part, unfortunately, in anticipation of a moment just like this. But I want to say plainly, the fact is that immigrants help make Virginia the safe and welcoming place that it is. More than 1 million immigrants call Virginia home, and 75% of those have lived here for more than a decade. Immigrants are Virginians, and Virginians are immigrants. And in fact, it's in part because of our immigrant communities that Virginia continues to be one of the safest states in the nation. Across the country, young men who were born outside the US are incarcerated at just 1/4 the rate of US-born men of the same age. And stepping back, that means that whole communities benefit from welcoming immigrants. Research has shown that neighborhoods with more immigrants have lower rates of crime than non-immigrant communities. There is no crisis of immigrants driving a crime wave in Virginia. And it's extremely disappointing that with this budget amendment and Executive Order 47, Virginia's governor has made it clear he's driving a divisive agenda, pretending that immigrants are a threat to be feared. As to the budget amendment, earlier this year, the General Assembly saw it for exactly what it is and rejected it. This amendment is an unfunded mandate that would force Virginia police to do the federal government's job for them. And it would stick Virginia taxpayers with the bill. In addition, it would almost certainly result in constitutional rights violations through unlawful, prolonged detention, and in combination with the state police task force created by Executive Order 47, racial profiling. And so tomorrow, we're confident that the legislature will do the right thing once again and reject these amendments. Thank you all.
Thanks, Chris. Our final speaker today is Monica Sarmiento, the Executive Director of VACIR, the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights. Monica?
Thank you so much, Sheila. And I'd like to also thank all the speakers here. I think first and foremost, it is such a powerful showing of strength and community when we have so many different faith leaders here in support and allyship of the immigrant community, because immigrant communities are far from alone. We have been here for such a long time, as Chris said. Virginians are immigrants and immigrants are Virginians, and showing that we are strength in numbers, far from those who are just directly impacted, to push on Governor Youngkin and the anti-immigrant rhetoric that has boiled up, has really pushed our Commonwealth into moral turpitude, which is why it's so important to show that the core leaders of our communities, our faith leaders, are standing up and saying that these are immoral actions, inhumane actions, and the treatment of our immigrant communities needs to change in terms of recognizing them for who they are, their value, and that they have more than just economic value to our communities. These are parents, these are beloved friends, these are neighbors, and they have worth that is immeasurable, which is why it's so important that in this time where we're having such a moral crisis, that we recognize who we are, what our beliefs and values are, and that we're standing up for what is right. And what is right is to be humane and to be kind and to welcome the stranger. Thank you so much, Sheila.
Thank you. And just to repeat what Monica said, thank you so much to all of our speakers. It truly reminds me of our unity of values and of purpose when we have folks from the Baptists and the Muslim Civic League and the Jewish Community Relation Council and the UUs and Congregation Action Network, which is also interfaith, all together on one call, sharing the same voice. Before we wrap up, I want to mention that Virginia Interfaith does have an action alert. More than 1,200 folks from around Virginia have sent a letter to the governor asking him to reconsider Executive Order number 47 around 287G agreements. Additionally, we will have an action alert coming out later today around the budget amendments that will be considered in tomorrow's reconvened session of the General Assembly. If you'd like to get those emails, let me know, and I can also put a link in the chat. to the one that's written and the one that we'll be writing in the next half hour, I can send your way. Are there any questions from the press who've been on this call for myself or for any of our speakers?
I have a question. This is Jad Khalil with VPM News. I wanted to ask, I know there's been sort of a balance that advocates have tried to strike on the bill that would regulate automated license plate readers. I know that that's of particular concern to immigrant communities. I was hoping that some of the folks on the call might be able to share their perspective on the governor's amendments there, and what they'd like to see legislators do with the governor's amendments.
I'll say Virginia Interfaith Center has not taken an official position on that bill. It's not quite as central. It's not quite a part of our issue areas, but I know VACIR does have thoughts. So Monica, if you'd like to share, or if that's not appropriate for this call, perhaps you guys can arrange a follow-up.
Sure. Actually, the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights has officially decided to oppose the bill at this moment due to, I guess, a lot of the complications regarding Executive Order 47. But I do know that the ACLU of Virginia has taken a very public stance as of last week. Chris, I don't know if you have any comments that you'd like to share.
Yeah, happy to briefly, and thanks for the question. As Monica said, we have serious concerns about the bill as the governor has proposed to amend it. Chief among those, the reversing the reenactment clause that would require the assembly to come back and approve an expansion to VDOT maintained highways. The governor's amendments would allow an expansion, unlimited expansion to highways next year, if enacted in this way. In our view, the proliferation of these devices across the state with no limitation is the chief threat to immigrant communities and others, and on those grounds, we're opposing it in its current form.
Any other questions?
I have just a clarification. I'm from Radio Poder, a Latino radio station in Central Virginia. Can you clarify what exactly will happen with this amendment in Culpeper and the jail system? Can you just explain that to me again?
Yes, and I think that'll be best answered by Levi.
Sure.
I can take a stab at it, but.
So the governor's budget amendment proposes to transfer an old closed state juvenile prison to the local counties. And then it has language saying that it would not be eligible for the regular state operating funding that is available to local and regional jails. We are concerned because this would expand the capacity of the local counties to hold immigrants on federal contracts. So the federal government basically could lease that prison from the local governments for and use it as an immigration detention center, which concerns us as folks who believe that we should be trying to keep families and communities together.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Well, again, thank you all so much for being on this call, for focusing on this important issue. We know that as people of faith, we want to welcome our immigrant neighbors. We want to create a community that is vibrant and diverse. And we are so grateful to have so many voices on the call. We are, again, just concretely, we are asking the legislature to oppose the 3 gubernatorial amendments to the budget. Amendment 154, which would require localities to comply with Immigration and Customs Enforcement detainers in local jails. Amendment 192 around the lease of Culpeper Correctional Facility back to Culpeper and Page counties, and Amendment 64 providing tuition assistance but explicitly excluding people who are ineligible for federal tuition assistance. We are asking the legislature to oppose those 3 amendments tomorrow during the reconvened session. We are also asking Governor Youngkin to reconsider his Executive Order 47, asking local law enforcement agencies to enter into 287G agreements, and the impact that that executive order has had on the state police. If you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to follow up with all of our speakers. Well, with VACIR and VICPP, and we can put you in touch with individual speakers. Appreciate all of you taking the time out of your busy Tuesday, and I hope that you enjoy the sunshine that we've got so far in Virginia. Have a great afternoon.